Hey everyone, this is Jason Reynolds from Teach Me Cyber. Today I am joined by a very good friend of mine, Jeff Chan, and we're going to talk a little bit about how to break into cybersecurity and learn more about Jeff's background. So, Jeff, welcome to the show.
Hey, Jason, thanks for having me.
Jeff, why don't you start off with just giving us a high level understanding of what you're doing today and how are you filling your time?
Sure. Currently, I'm the VP of Technology at Mox 5. So I focus on anything that has to do with technology at Mox 5, both internally and externally. So from the different tools and technologies that our team leverages to what our clients also leverage on a day-to-day basis to go through an incident response effort.
Awesome. Yeah, I know you guys very well, obviously, and you guys do amazing work. Jeff, we get asked each other all the time about how to break into cybersecurity, and one of our favorite interview questions that you and I have used for years and years and years is about your background and how you came to be. So this is almost like we're going back to when I first interviewed you, and may or may not have fallen asleep, not because of the quality of your answers, but because of how much I was working them. But let's ask the question here. Tell us a little bit about your cybersecurity journey and how did you get to where you are today?
Absolutely. I think it's always a great question, and I won't bug you for falling asleep if you fall asleep on this answer. But I think it goes back to when I was in high school. I got exposed to a lot of different movies, as corny and cliche as it may sound, where it all involved about hacking and hacking computers and doing this and doing that. And it really got me interested. And obviously, I started reading more and more articles about how to perform hacking activities and how to get into or break into systems and things along those lines. And for me, that was something that was quite interesting, but never knew that that was something that I could have a career in. And when I went and pursued my undergrad, I started doing multiple things. I went and worked at a basketball team for managing their websites and things along those lines. But it really wasn't that appealing to me. I wanted that adrenaline, even though I'm not an adrenaline junkie. I don't do skydiving or anything like that. I just wanted something more. And when I chatted with my college advisor, he said, Jeff, there's this other opportunity in here that I have here. Nobody has applied to it, but I think let's try it out. It's related to computers. You might be interested in it. It's about cybersecurity. And I'm like, okay, great. I think this is something that I would definitely be interested in. So I went there, took their test, went through the interview rounds, and when I got the offer for an internship, I started learning more and more about it. And one of my first few cases was actually doing mobile digital forensics on 3 Blackberries, and for me that was like, whoa. I actually did not sleep the first night because I was actually doing forensics on those devices, and from there on, everything just kind of spiraled into so many different directions on what I could do and what I could become in the future. And for me, from there on, I knew that I wanted to be in forensics. And shortly after, went and pursued my master's in security informatics. I lived in Baltimore. That's where I met you in DC. And then started working for multiple consulting firms and really focusing and specializing in forensics.
So
So,
when you first got started, then it was when you were in college, and just a one of your advisors kind of pointed you in this direction. You talked about the internship. So was that the first real experience that you had in cyber?
yes, absolutely. Well, I would say unofficially, obviously, when I was in high school, there were other experiences that I gotten exposed to, but professionally, yes, absolutely. It was during my
Well,
college
let's
days.
talk a little bit about the high school experience then. What was that?
Well, let's just say that it involved a lot of rubber duckies and other things that may not be uh, that interesting to discuss on this podcast. But nonetheless, it did give me a ton of experience to actually break into systems, understand like how it works, and ultimately get very passionate about it once I did find that there was an opportunity to actually do this for a living. So
So kind of exploratory in high school, kind of testing the limits of certain
very
things.
exploratory.
But once you found the
Yes.
professional way into that, that's where things just really started accelerating for you.
Yeah, exactly.
Gotcha. Okay. And it's funny how you said when you were doing the website development for an MBA team, it wasn't exciting for you. I feel like a lot of people would be excited by that. Tell us a little bit more about that because I think this is a really cool aspect of something you've done in the past.
So I'll have to reframe it. I guess yes, it was exciting, but as far as from a career trajectory perspective, it wasn't that exciting for me. But I was basically part of the Miami Heat basketball team, so I would actually have to go through every single basketball game. So as a college student, after I finished all my courses, I would have to go to the stadium, interview players, hang out in the locker room and chat with them, and then grab a bunch of useful information that would be very useful in social media, so Twitter, Facebook, and so on, and also post certain things into the website, so pictures, videos, etc. And for me, that was interesting because I got to get exposed to a lot of very famous athletes like LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, and so on. And it was a great experience chatting with them at a personal level. But ultimately, from a professional level, I thought that there's always more that I could do, that I could be far more analytical behind everything that I do on a computer. And for me, that was my, kind of had to pull the trigger and said, you know what, as much as I would love to work another season here, I think I want to take my talent somewhere else. So hence moving into cyber.
Well, and I think to this day, you're still the only security professional that I know that has an NBA ring. So there's something to be said about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you mentioned that after your internship, you started in consulting. Why did you go consulting, and what was consulting? Because that's obviously a very broad term.
Yeah, that's a great question. The reason why I got into consulting was because I wanted to get exposed to so many different things. Knowing if I went to a company that does internal security, personally for me, I feel that I would have been limited as far as what are the different options out there. And security is so broad. You can be either in GRC, you can be more proactive and do pen testing or red teaming, or into the defensive side of the house where you're doing you're either a SOC analyst or you want to be a forensics analyst and so forth. And for me, it was kind of at that stage where I thought that I was going down that path of being a forensics analyst and wanted to be that. But I also wanted to branch out and learn different things. Ultimately, I wasn't 100% sure as far as what path I wanted to go into, but I did want to get exposed. And one of the easiest ways to do that would be to go through consulting. My first job in consulting, after working at the Miami Heat team, I actually started getting involved into a lot of different things. So not just doing the forensics analysis on mobile devices. I also did pen testing gigs or web application pen tests, and also focused on a lot of compliance and regulatory items on the security side for the GRC component. And for me, those are great. Don't get me wrong. I would actually love to do GRC related type of work in the future, but it wasn't my bread and butter. It was something that I wanted to be far more interested. I would be enjoyed working, every single day. And for me, that was forensics. And how I got into that was really through the experience of a consulting shop.
So when you were trying to figure out like where that interest was, you were trying a lot of different things. Like how did you end up falling into or selecting the forensics aspect of it?
That's a great question. Honestly, I got so lucky with forensics because the first engagement that I had working at that consulting firm was actually doing forensic analysis on mobile devices. And for me, I remember I was working with my boss back then, and it was 3, 4 in the morning. We were in the office and working, and little did I know it was 3, 4 in the morning. And then for me, I'm like, well, I can't sleep because I really want to continue working. I want to do a good job. It wasn't sort of I want to set a good impression or anything along those lines. It was more of I'm interested that I want to do this and I want to continue doing this, right? And for me, that was the immediate trigger where it immediately said, you know what, if I do get this same exciteful moment or sort of feeling, then I know that that's something that I'm interested in, want to do for the rest of my life. And when I did that for GRC, for different types of assessments and so forth, I didn't get that same level of excitement. I was interested because at the end of the day, it was still security related. But for me, that's where it just said, okay, it screamed, you should do forensic, you should dive down this path, and this is something that you want to do. So
Do you think that's like when people talk about finding your passion? Do you think that's what it is?
yeah, 100%. I think you shouldn't be afraid to try different things. At the end of the day, we don't know the answers to everything. And it doesn't have to be specifically on the technical realm. If you're deciding on whether to be a manager or just an individual contributor on the technical side of the house, you should try it out and see if it actually is something that you're interested in. Some people say that they are, but never really get that exposure. So why not just give it a shot, right? And if it doesn't work out, then that's absolutely fine because at the end of the day, you won't regret it, and you'll think about that, in the future and say, you know what, I'm glad that I did this. I'm glad that I did that, knowing that it wasn't my thing, but at least I know that I tried out all these different options and found out something that I truly am passionate about.
So, what caused you to leave that first consulting job and look for your next opportunity?
So during my undergrad, I never really had a focus in security. So I had a couple courses here and there, but it wasn't as technical, or it didn't cover a lot of the concepts that I was hoping that it would cover. Nothing wrong with the classes or anything like that. It was just more of a maturity level from the curriculum perspective. And for me, I just wanted to learn more and more. I'm the type of guy that loves to learn and absorb and continuously grow. So for me, I just wanted to find a school that I could actually learn more about security, not just again forensics or anything like that, but just the whole spectrum behind it. And shortly after, I started looking for a couple different universities and different master's programs, and I found one at Hopkins in Baltimore that I decided, you know what, this pretty much covers everything that I'm looking for. I've never seen the snow, so it's always a positive. And for me, that was one of those things where I'm like, you know what, let me just leave Miami and then go somewhere else. And when I went to Hopkins to actually study forensics and everything else, pen testing and so forth, it was the best decision ever. So,
What was that like, leaving Miami and going to a place you've never been before? Like, how did you come to that decision that you were ready for that and it was the right decision?
great question. Honestly, it was an easy decision, but purely because before going to Miami for my undergrad, I used to live in Colombia in South America. So for me, I've already made that big jump going to Miami. And when I did that, I'm like, okay, well, it doesn't really matter. Nothing can stop me. I can go anywhere else I want to in this world. I'll just have to, set my eyes to it, and that's what I want to do. So when I found the program, it was great. It worked for me, even though I've never seen the snow or anything like that. Never experienced cold weathers. For me, I said, you know what? Let's just do it. It doesn't really matter, and let's just go and take this leap of faith almost in a way, and just ended up pulling the trigger.
And how did you choose that program?
Uh, Great question. I think it was largely due to the professors and also the courses that were available there as well. So there's a great professor, Matthew Green or Matt Green. He's one of, in my opinion, he's a crypto legend. He works on cryptographic elements and talks about those on a day-to-day basis. And for me, I wanted to be in that class and I wanted to learn more about cryptography and learn from the best. And for me, that was one of those things where I'm like, sure, I know I wanted to be in forensics. At that point, I was 99% sure that forensics was going to be my go-to. But knowing the level or the quality of the professors that were there was very appealing to me. I could learn almost everything and understand the core concepts from a theory perspective to the implementation of it. And I think that was the right balance for me in finding a master's program that could give you both versus leaning on one side or the other side. So hence decided to go to that program.
When do you think a master's program makes sense for people, specifically a master's in cybersecurity?
That's a fantastic question. I honestly don't think there's a right answer to it, and the reason why I say that, I think it really depends on on the person's trajectory. At the end of the day, for me, I didn't get enough from my undergrad that I
Mm.
wanted more and more. And granted, going in straight into a job that would have been excellent, but I knew that I wasn't ready, and I knew that I needed more materials to learn the core concepts of security before I actually started doing interviews and applying to companies that I was interested in. So for me, at that point in time, was when I decided, you know what, I just need to learn a little bit more before I can really pull the trigger and then start applying to the different companies that I want to work with. So for me, it was purely on that, and I think for other folks, it just really depends, right? It's if you're at a point in your career where you're continuously growing and learning, but not really everything that you need in order to grow even faster, then maybe it makes sense. And granted, master's program isn't for everyone. At the end of the day, you could still achieve the same exact things that you would get from a master's program from working at a very technical company and consulting and learning from being in the trenches, and getting that experience. So
So, when you finished your degree, you started looking for full time opportunities. How did you go about trying to find the right job for you?
that's a very funny question because when I first got interested in security and I worked, that first forensics matter that I worked overnight and so on, the first question that I asked my boss at that time, which was, now that I think of it, probably not the best question to ask. I'm like, what sort of companies would be companies that would do forensics or are the best in forensics? And he laughed and he told me Mandiant. Mandiant's the one that you should apply to. So for me, from that day, I said, okay, great. My goal is going to be apply to Mandiant. I am going to do that. This is what I want to do. And I started learning more about APT and reading everything about APT1, for example, and I got even more and more interested. And when I did my master's and was looking for jobs at towards the tail end of the program, I said, you know what, Mandiant's going to be the one that I'm going to have to apply to, and obviously a couple other ones. But for me, it was the companies that I knew were the best in the specific field that I wanted to get into. And then from there on, I just said, you know what, if I wanted to be the best, I have to work with the best, and hence Mandiant. So.
Interesting. So, when you were going in and applying for that, how did you try to position yourself? You've got a little bit of work experience by that time. You've got this master's degree. How did you try to present yourself to Mandiant?
So it was really tough, to be honest, to be quite candid with you, because obviously very little experience, haven't done any sort of nation state sort of investigation or anything along those lines. I was pretty junior, to be honest with you. But the reality of it was I've learned a ton, and taking all of those experience and that analytical mindset and that hustle or that drive, I think ultimately is what was the differentiator. And granted, yes, you did fall asleep during the interview, and
Allegedly,
that was one thing,
allegedly.
allegedly. But nonetheless, I think it's more about that hustle and drive that hopefully, I think that's what got me the job at Mandiant. So.
How do you get that to come across on a resume or in an interview then? Because you don't have a lot of raw material to work with, right? But you do want to be able to show that you do have that hustle and that drive, and you've got that that energy or that interest and that curiosity. Like, what take us back there, right? What was going through your mind, and how did you try to do that?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I did was, since I had that experience at the other consulting firm that I've worked for, doing forensics, I highlighted those in my resume. I was very pointed as far as what I wanted to put in the resume. So I highlighted not specifically those cases by names or anything like that, but just more of the type of work that I was doing.
Mm,
But aside from that, throughout my entire master's program, my emphasis was on forensics. So my thesis was focused on how to be able to catch botnets out there, like Sue's botnets and so on. And for me, that was one of those things where I could differentiate myself from other candidates by just showing your passion through the different projects that you're working with or working on that may not be directly related to a class, but more of a larger thesis sort of thing. So for me, that was one of the things that I said, you know what, I can showcase my passion through how I talk through things. But once I need to get through that first initial screening, right, through the resume checks. So I got that, and I knew that once I would get that first call with the right folks, then people would get to see that passion coming through. So.
awesome. Okay, so and we know from just from working with you for so long that you got that job at Mandiant. So you got your dream job, right? Tell us a little bit about that.
I think it was great. The first case was actually one of uh, it was an APT1 case that I got brought in by one of my colleagues, Alec Rendazzo, that I think you also know as well. And from there, I just wanted to absorb as much as I could. So I was like a little kid at a candy store. I was talking to people. I was chatting with everybody, every single manager, every single consultant. Hey, awesome to meet you. How can I get more exposure? I would love to get on this case and that case and this other case because I just wanted to absorb as much as I could. And one of the best career advice that I got was keep absorbing. and ask questions. Like, don't be afraid of asking questions. If you're just waiting, sure, you'll eventually get there, but by asking more and more questions, you'll get exposed to certain things that otherwise you wouldn't, or it would take some time to get to, right? And knowing this whole space, you sometimes won't be certain that you would get certain threat actors or certain cases you want to work on. So you just have to have that hustle and that determination to work on those interesting cases or those edge cases that you really want to get to see. So for me, I started jumping in on every single case as I could, supporting the team as much as I can, even doing little things that probably would be considered not that fancy or very sexy, quote unquote. But it was something that for me, at least, I got the exposure and starting to absorb from the brains of so many sharp folks that are in this industry. So.
So what was the day in the life of Jeff Chan as a forensic analyst then? What if somebody's coming to you and saying, "Hey, like what does a forensic analyst do?" What did that look like at Mandiant?
Yeah, it was running LR scans or sweeps, I guess, so to speak, and then from there doing forensic analysis on individual systems. And um, the the way that I was taught from my first consulting firm was different from how Mandiant was doing it, which was interesting. So for me, it was less so of the debt disk forensics and actually taking each individual system and then doing a full forensics analysis and a report for each of those. It was more focused on let's figure out the whole trajectory of the entire incident. So how do we do that? We run sweeps and keep scanning the systems, all the systems, multiple times based on the indicators that we identify, and then keep doing it. And for me, I wanted to get in that whole world of okay, let me just sweep and sweep all the way throughout and find every bit of forensic artifact that we know is related to a threat actor, right? So I would spend my whole time just working with folks that have seen a ton in the industry that could share me bits and pieces of their mindset or their their analytical approach and how can I use it on my day to day. So I would take all those experiences, try to find bad guys or find evil, and then rinse and repeat and do it every single day until I got better and better. So.
How long do you think it took you then to get comfortable with how Mandiant did their investigations?
In terms of the process, I would say probably a couple of months. I mean, 2, 3 months, I was already comfortable with the entire process. But actually learning all the different tidbits, it does take a while, and it's an ever-growing sort of thing, for lack of a better term. Because at the end of the day, threat actors are going to come up with new tactics or new ways to compromise systems or move laterally or do things in, on a network, and those you will always keep learning and learning and learning. And at the end of the day, there's no here's the ceiling and you have to reach that ceiling. And once you do, you're done. You just have to keep growing and learning. So I don't think you ever stop. So yeah,
Yeah, I think that's one of the most important things there. I mean, I've certainly seen others where it's apparent that they've stopped learning and they've just become set in their ways. And unfortunately, I think those are the people that end up getting lapped, right? And you compare that to the lifelong learners, and it's just night
yeah,
and day because security is not static, right? You have to evolve or you become irrelevant.
yeah, exactly.
So how long were you at Mandiant for?
I think a year and a half, almost 2 years.
Okay.
Yeah,
And what
roughly
happened
around
after
there.
Mandiant? Where'd you go?
Well, I actually chatted with a couple of former Mandiant folks, and got an opportunity to work at Rapid7, who was also trying to build their forensics practice, and they're looking for senior folks. And for me, that was a great opportunity to just take the experiences that I had at Mandiant and then apply it somewhere else. And after that, obviously moved to a couple of different consulting firms, Cripsys being one of those, and then did the same exact thing there. So it's focusing on taking all my experiences, how do I bottle it up, and then leverage it at the next consulting firm that I worked at, and then take that experience and then teach others and coach others and mentor others to become even better than I would ever be in forensics. So
So tell me a little bit about that experience, right? Because for anyone that has gone to a new job, it can be daunting, right? It's like how much do you bring with you versus how much do you assimilate? What was the most helpful way for you as you approach jumping into a new environment and presumably trying to help upgrade or up level some of what they're doing, and how did you integrate everything?
Yeah, there's a balance to your point. I think at the end of the day, there's no right or wrong answer. Companies will have their own ways of, doing forensics in this case, right? And the main goal or the main thing to think through, or that I thought through when I was going through that experience, was how can I make significant impact without having to rock the boat too much? If you rock the boat too much, then granted, people can see you as a threat more so than somebody that's trying to help out the team, right? So
Mm,
for me, one of the big lessons is okay, when becoming a leader or a mentor, however you want to call it, you really want to be able to know how to influence, not in a malicious sort of way or anything like that, but is how can you influence other folks to see the vision that you have, and see why this is the right path or a path that should be considered. And it may not be a one time type of thing where you just say one thing and everybody will believe you. It's more about a rinse and repeat, and you have to kind of showcase your values and why you think this will bring significant impact or value to the rest of the team. So there's a delicate balance at the end of the day. You kind of have to keep preaching what you believe in, and then ultimately, if everything goes out well, then yes, you can instill bits and pieces of it. But the key point is making sure that you're not rocking the boat too much.
I feel like that's such an understated value that people or perspective that people really need to latch onto because I feel like it doesn't matter if you're the smartest person in the room. If you are, maybe you're in the wrong room, first of all, right? But
Right.
most importantly, we forget that we're dealing with humans, and there's a lot of for better or worse emotion that's attached to these things, and so yeah, I've seen so many people fall on their face just because they go into a new environment and just start calling people out on, hey, why would this is wrong? You're doing it wrong. And so, one of the things that I've always latched onto is a term that said, just understand why the fence was built in the first place, right? And the concept behind
Exactly.
it is a fence is built for a reason, right? And maybe it's to keep something in, or maybe it's to keep something out. But your first question should be know or understand why. Why was this fence built in the first place? Because there was probably a valid reason for it. And then once you understand that, then seek to understand, do you still need that fence? And do you need to make that fence bigger, smaller, whatever it is? But it's just sort of like get in there, understand that layout, and then to your point, influence. So
Yeah.
like influence is such a vague word as well, though, right? So like, what does influence mean for you as you're going into these scenarios?
I think influence just means, being able to instill your own vision into somebody else's, perception on what should be not right or wrong, but what should be their own path, right? So, in a way, people can take what you say and implement it in a different way, but taking those core concepts, right? So you've got a lot of different, uh, not influencers per se, but let's say a lot of valued members in the tech industry. Let's take Steve Jobs as an example. Related to what you were highlighting, he said the why. Focus on the why. So when you focus on the why, you understand why customers want it, why they're looking for a product, not why they should need it, right? Or how they should need it, how they're going to get it, or what it is, right? As you focus on that why and you work your way outwards towards the what you're trying to build, you'll be able to get to that point where you're understanding the end user. So in this case, when it comes to influence, you really need to be able to get to the core value of that person, and they can then interpret whatever you say however they want to, but they'll take it to an extent where it can make a meaningful impact with what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. So for me, that's really influence, and really influencing is making sure that you can, it's almost somewhat related to becoming a leader, but
Hmm,
how can you instill good values into other folks so that they can then leverage that for their own better as well.
I love it. So you did consulting for a while. What happened when you hit the end of that consulting line? What was going through your head there, and where did you go?
I'll start off with burnout is real, right? I mean, at the end of the day, when you're in forensics, burnout is true. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. You know me, I'm always fully transparent with those types of things, but burnout is true within the industry, right? And for me, the type of guy that works almost 24/7, it was not healthy. For me, I needed to kind of pump the brakes a little bit and kind of get to see what the world is on the other side of the table, right?
Mm.
We help clients with responding to incidents. I also wanted to be able to get to see what it would be like on the other side of the fence, right? And for me, that was one of the things where I just said, you know what, let me just take a look at it from that other perspective, and see what it would be if I were in the shoes of internal security. And very similar to what we talked about earlier, during this whole conversation, um, I never really knew what I wanted to do early on. Like, sure, forensics, 99% sure. I dabbled in GRC space, the proactive world as well. For me, it was one of those moments where I'm like, okay, great. I want to continue learning. I want to continue growing. Um, Let me see what internal security is all about, and then test the waters. And maybe it is something that I would fall in love with and want to continue my path there. And hence, I moved over to HP, focusing on the advanced threat pursuit team, which is essentially a threat hunting team, and building that practice with a couple of other coworkers as well.
So I want to dig into that, but I think your call out on burnout is huge. What advice would you have for cybersecurity professionals to help them manage burnout?
Um, a wise man once told me, hint, hint, Jason Rebels, manage your calendar. You got to respect and know how to manage your calendar and respect it, right? There's going to be points in time where, yes, you want to help clients and you want to make, impactful change in their lives and help them, right? They're going through a tough time, but you also have to be mindful of your own self and well-being. At the end of the day, you need to help yourself before you can help others. It's very similar to the whole, messaging that you have when you go onto an airplane, where they say, put on your mask first before you help others. So you need to take care of yourself first. And if you aren't doing that, then there's something that you need to focus on, which is yourself. And how do you spend more time grabbing a 30-minute lunch and disconnecting all your devices, putting it on the side for 30 minutes? The world would be completely fine if you do that, and then just eat, just enjoy, focus on the meal. If with the whole remote work sort of days going on, if you have a special someone, just work with them, just eat with them at home, and spend 30 minutes just talking about anything other than work, and really find that balance every single day, and respect your calendar. So I use my calendar fairly heavily, where I put time on my lunches, the gym workouts, and doing this and doing that, and taking care of yourself, because oftentimes it does get overseen fairly easily. So.
It's great advice. So, all right, let's talk internal security then. What was that transition like going from the consulting world into that internal role?
It was extremely tough, to be quite candid with you, because moving into internal security, coming in from the space that I was in, consultant, working 24 by 7, working really late nights and early mornings, for me, it was a big shift, right? Internal security is far slower paced. So for me, it's trying to get adjusted to that whole mindset of it's not a fire every single day. And it's something that you don't have to resolve within an hour or 2 hours. It's something that you can resolve in a day or two, or maybe a whole week. So for me, that transition was probably the toughest, where I needed to level set with what the expectations were. And granted, that did give me a lot of time to focus on myself, on taking care of myself, eating well, working out every single day, and things like that. And that transition was lovely. But again, from a professional perspective, obviously it was a little bit different, because things are far slower. Influencing plays a very, very important role, especially in internal security,
Mm.
because you need to be able to share your value across others. And being able to do that is not an overnight type of thing, because they're not dealing with an incident. You're trying to instill something that people are always hesitant to, accept. And security is always one of those departments, quote unquote, that people oftentimes don't listen to that often. So when it comes to security, you just have to keep repeating, 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 to make sure that your values get spread across. So.
Why is it that you think that other departments in organizations don't listen to security? Is it a messaging thing? Is it a priority thing? What's your experience there?
I think it's a culture thing. Companies, and this is from what I've seen, not on the internal side of the house working in internal security, but more on the consulting side. When you've seen clients that have been compromised multiple times, second time around, their ears are far more open as far as what they can do to be better and prevent this issue from happening. Now, when you're looking at a company that has never been compromised whatsoever, they don't want to invest in something that they don't know if something bad is going to happen, right? They don't know that there's going to be a compromise next year, or they need to have folks on the security stack because of XYZ reasons. They just don't want to invest in it. So listening to folks in the security side is always something that is underappreciated at the end of the day. You could look at Slack as an example. I think it's a perfect example where obviously in the first few days of Slack, security wasn't a big thing. But ultimately, when they had gone through a breach and an incident, now they've taken a completely different emphasis on security where they're far more security focused. Their team members are respected far more, and ultimately their culture as a team is oriented along the lines of security and how can they be far more thoughtful on that. So
So you think evolving the culture of security in a company, is that what helps open up a better dialogue?
yeah, 100%. And it starts from the top, right? So
Mm.
if your CEO, CTO, CISO, CSO, whoever's on the C-level board, I think at the end of the day, it starts with them to start influencing across the broader team so that they have that mindset and that culture changes completely. You oftentimes look at security companies, why they're all security focused is because, sure, they're working on a security product or a service, but at the end of the day, it starts with leadership trying to push down and instill those security related values across every single team member, not just whoever is performing or working on the specific product that they're trying to build or the services that they're trying to perform, but also back office, accounting, finance, human resources, and getting everybody on that mindset is it's tough, but it really starts from the top.
Gotcha. So, internal security. What was the title that you had at HP?
It was defense engineer, level four,
Okay. So, what does
which
that mean?
yeah, so I was basically an equivalent to a principal consultant in a consulting firm, but obviously focused in internal security. Now, my role at HP was a little bit broad because at the end of the day, when our team first started growing, we had so many different pockets that we needed to be in. We had Splunk and other different technologies as well that we had to manage, but um, ultimately we can jump in and pretty much do whatever we needed to help the company move forward from a security perspective. So threat hunting, actually doing the threat hunting level 3 type of work, but also building technologies and tools to help automate all those different things so we can focus on what really matters. So for me, I'm a true believer of automation and making things fairly easily. You know, from the Mandiant days of having built the foosbot and so on, for me, I wanted to take that same mindset of how can we automate a lot of the things that are coming through to us so that we make our processes far smoother and easier. So effectively, I built an automation sort of platform that reduces 80-90% of the alerts that we have, or reduces those false positives so we don't have to start clicking, marking them as false positive. Let's just let the tool take care of it, giving the conditions that we're giving it. And ultimately, that allowed us to focus on what really matters: how to find bad guys, how to actually run things that are meaningful, looking at the different blog posts that we see on a day to day basis. And if we have those technologies in place, then how can we find those vulnerabilities, or how can we detect bad guys because of XYZ indicators that we saw on the front end? So, um, those types of things.
Got it. So, I want to double click into that automation platform, but before that, please enlighten everyone here on what is Foosbot.
Yeah, so Foosbot came out of uh, it came out of Mandian. So Mandian, we played foosball almost pretty much every single day. But the way that we had it set up with an Excel spreadsheet, and obviously it was prone to cheating and other things that we probably don't want to get into. But long story short, foosball was a key component to the culture of the team. Everybody would play foosball. You would play with other consultants, and sure, you would play a nice game of foosball, but at the same time, you would talk about the different cases as you're playing and so forth. And it just really built that camaraderie at the end of the day. But it was fairly manual. You had to ping somebody to add the scores in there, and then that person would add the scores in there. And it'll keep tabs on every single individual. So what I ended up creating, one day, I just said, you know what, let's figure out if we can automate it. How can we make this far easier? So I created a foosbot, which essentially is a Raspberry Pi that had an NFC reader, and you have your badges. So you can badge into the game, and then it'll keep track of every single score. So when you win and how long the games would last, and best out of three, right? And it would use ELO rankings or ratings. So basically, if you beat somebody that's on the top of the list, you'll jump significantly versus if you beat somebody that's lower down the list of the pool of players. And it became a very intense competitive thing to a point where I think we had 30 different players in the office, and everybody had a badge. Everybody was badging in and playing. It would come up with different trolls or jokes across the teams and post them into the Skype channel as well. So it definitely got around the entire office, Foosbot. So
When are you going to be manufacturing this for the masses?
I'm actually working on the next version of Foosbot. Hopefully cloud-based. It's going to be a little bit tougher to manage. Obviously, you still need a physical device on premise, but hoping to release everything for everyone to be able to implement it. If you have a foosball table near you, feel free to implement Foosbot down the road.
Amazing, absolutely amazing. All right, let's get back to security automation, though. How did you identify the need for security automation at HP?
Time. You spend a lot of time working on a lot of things that were very repetitive, right? So if uh, for me, not to go into like all of the nitty gritty details, but there was a specific indicator that kept popping up every single time, but there's no way of turning it off. You can't turn off that indicator because we don't want to um, you know, um, miss out on a potential indicator that could be a really bad sort of alert or flag that happens within the environment. So for me, it was doing this same step over and over again every single day. So for me, how can how can we automate that? How can we simplify that process? So every single day we got the same alerts. It was probably around 1,000 or so alerts per day that we got, and those alerts we wanted to reduce it. So how do we do it? We started looking at the patterns and the logic behind it, and what are the type of the alerts that we got, what are the indicators that we got, so the hashes of the files that were being flagged as malicious but weren't really malicious, and how could we go around that. So we added embedded some logic behind it, and once we ironed out what that logic would look like, we build a tool around it. So how can we detect it first and then run this logic? Once the logic passes as true or false, then we decide what happens afterwards. And that started growing and growing and growing to a point where we built in a lot of different um, uh, sort of bypasses, quote unquote, or the logic behind the automation tool that could then stop all these different indicators or false positives from popping up and us having to respond to it. So
I love it. Yeah, it's. I think the world needs more Jeff Chans here to automate more things in, in cybersecurity because time seems to always be one of the biggest constraints for so many security teams.
yeah, absolutely.
So, how did you know it was time to step away from HP and look at your next opportunity?
Well, for me, I knew that I wanted to continue making a difference. Like I already got the experience at HP that I wanted to. I know what internal security was all about. And for me, I just want to continue delivering on the front end. How can I help the masses? And obviously, and not no, not throwing shades or anything at internal security, the idea of working in like a company doing internal security or anything like that. But for me, it was just not my cup of tea.
Mhm.
I think I wanted to be far more on the front end, helping organizations and being able to spread my knowledge as far wide as I can, not just one company, but others around me as well. And for me, that's where I wanted to move to a company that could make meaningful impact across the board, and hence Mox 5, being able to solve the problems within the cybersecurity industry on the insurance side of the house, and how to make meaningful impact out of this whole thing. So.
And so, yeah, you went over to Mox 5 then. And so, what were you doing at Mox 5 early days?
Yeah, so I was a technical advisor at Mox 5. I was focusing on helping clients respond to incidents. primarily on the recovery side, but also supporting on the forensic side as well. And then making sure that we can set the right strategic path and effectively recover as soon as possible. And the sooner we can get them, the better. You would want to get your operations back and running in 10 days versus 20 days. So how can we reduce that gap from 20 days to as close as 10 days or 0 days as we can, right? And really, that was my emphasis in how can we help organizations get to that stage by bringing in the right folks to be able to deliver the hands-on support as needed.
So tell us a little bit more on recovery. What does that mean?
Yeah, recovery is essentially when systems are impacted by ransomware specifically. The most common sort of type of threat that we see day to day, we see in the news out there. Systems are usually down, right? And systems are encrypted, so theoretically you can't put those back online. And in some cases, software or technologies are not, or applications are not working properly. So how do we do that? We can either take a look at backups, we can take a look at potential snapshots or images of those devices that have been impacted, and then let's try to restore them and reintegrate them with the entire population. But you have to do it in a very delicate manner, right? Where you have to take care of the containment aspect of it, making sure that you're not booting a system that has malware or any sort of persistence mechanism within it, and so forth. So you have to be very delicate when it comes to recovering these devices, but ultimately is taking every single system that has been impacted by ransomware and then getting them back online. And in some cases, it means let's not turn these Windows XP systems ever again. Let's shut them off completely, and then bringing other ones online as needed.
So that seems like an area that's ripe for automation, just given how much stuff you're tracking there.
Yeah, 100%. I do think that automation is like in the forefront of everything. Is whatever you can do to automate it, the better, right? We've helped our some of our clients in the past where the decryption utility does not work at scale or cannot be run at scale across multiple systems at a time. But we figured out a way by investing 10, 20 hours of just development efforts and how can we run the decryption tool across the board and leveraging tools that may not be as common or could be common for threat actors. So we want to be very cautious with that. So leveraging, let's say, P as exec or something along those lines, right? To be able to then run the decryption utility across the board. And we've been able to do that by just focusing on the what the true problem really is, right? Versus just being on that hamster wheel, which oftentimes is really common. That once you get on the wheel and you keep running, that you oftentimes forget to pause, take a step back, and then try to solve a problem that you've got in front of your faces. So
So how do you try to solve that problem? I guess first of all, how do you identify that problem?
yeah, it's honestly it's really tough because it really depends on the experience that you have. So I think as you evolve and grow in this industry and you get exposed to a lot of different incidents, you start seeing the same trends over and over again. So very similar to the experience that I had at HP, where we saw the same indicators, the same alerts flagging every single time, right? And if it's the same issues that happen on and on and on, then there's a problem. How can we try to figure out a better way to solve that problem? And in some cases, there may not be. So I'm not saying that for every problem that pops up, there's going to be a solution for it. But at the end of the day, you can streamline certain pieces of it to make it far more streamlined. So it's really getting exposed to as many incidents as you can, and then ultimately seeing what are the recurring themes that you see commonly, and how we can reduce that or eliminate that from happening.
Love it. Cool. So let's switch gears here a little bit and go into a few other questions here. You dropped some amazing advice before on career advice, but I'll ask the question again anyway. What's the greatest career advice you've ever received?
Um, I'm going to give you three, if that's okay with you.
I'll take three.
One of them is always keep growing and learning. So don't do not be the smartest guy in the room. To your point, if you're the smartest guy in the room, then you're in the wrong room, right? So always keep learning, and you may know what the answer is, but learn from somebody else's perspective. Learn why they're saying certain things in that call that you're in, or a team meeting, or what have you. But always keep learning from them, because uh, you can oftentimes you get into a state where the more senior you are, the more you want to block out all the other noise, and you want to avoid that because you want to keep learning and growing from other folks, and they may have the right answer, and if they don't, then it's a teachable moment for them, right? So in a way, you always want to keep growing and always want to keep learning, and don't shy away from that. um, the second one is, don't be afraid to make mistakes. Oftentimes I've made tons of mistakes in my life. I'm not going to say I'm a perfect guy or anything, but making mistakes is actually awesome. And I encourage people to make mistakes. Obviously, don't make very, very big whoopsies or anything like that, but don't be afraid of it, right? Because at the end of the day, those mistakes are could help you continue growing and learning, right? You know one way of how not to do certain things, but it's also a teachable moment because there are other people in the future that are going to run through that same exact situation that you can help them and guide them on that right path, right? And then the last question, the last advice is one that I've already highlighted before, but ask questions. The more questions you ask, the better, because um, you shouldn't think that you know everything. And by continuously asking questions, you're probing and understanding somebody else's mindset. And you can learn from those experiences and then leverage it for future needs as well. And it doesn't have to be technical related, so related in your own space on, forensics or anything like that. It could be related to leadership or management, or how to have tough conversations with a direct report or things along those lines. There's a lot of things in life where you have to learn, and you won't learn if you don't ask questions. So keep asking questions.
I love it. Well, I'm going to keep asking you questions now. Along the same vein, what advice do you have for people who are just starting their cybersecurity career?
um, I would tell them to not worry if you don't know what niche you want to be in. I've had a couple of folks ask me that same question, folks that are in the master's program and folks that are in my alma mater as well. And they keep asking me, like, I don't know how to get into security. I'm not as lucky as you were to find forensics, and knowing that that was your career path. Like, how can I do that? I want to find my forensics. And oftentimes I tell them, don't worry about the niche. Like, just focus on getting into the industry. If you like the space, you will enjoy anything within that space. There are levels or degrees to it, right? And the more you learn from all these different types of roles that you can be in, whether it be on the GRC space or proactive or more reactive on the forensics front, you will eventually find something that you're interested in. And if you're a student, highly recommend you take advantage of internships, and don't be afraid, once you're in those internships, to ask more and more questions. Like, don't be afraid to just say, hey, can I shadow you on a case that you're doing for forensics or a proactive sort of engagement as well. And just knowing that you're going to constantly learn more and more until you can find your own niche. So don't worry about it. You'll eventually get there. It may be a 1 year type of thing. It could be a 2, 3 year, 5 years type of thing, but eventually you will find it. And when you do, you won't regret it. You're going to be happy with what you're doing.
It's a really interesting call out because I feel like we live in a world of instant gratification now. And I just think back to even when I was learning. This is, back when the earth was still cooling, but it's it's at a point where it's just like if you don't grasp the concept in the first 15 minutes, you're like, "Well, this is stupid. I don't want to do this anymore." And like I love how
Yeah.
you called out, you're not going to figure this out in the first year potentially. Like it might be a multi-year process to figure out what's important. But I think to your point, right? It's like don't give up, right? And it's that continuously trying and experimenting and exposure to different areas that can really help drive you forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Everyone is on a completely different path. There is no sort of manual that you can give somebody and say, you know what, run with this and you will be 100% successful. No, because that manual is just geared towards that one person who wrote it. And that may not be the best approach for you or for me or for anybody else within the industry. And people leverage those experiences to shape their own experiences and try to find their own path into cyber. And to your point, yeah, you may not find the right thing that you want to do within the next 2, 3 years or so. But as long as you're patient and if you're really interested in cyber and this is where you want to be, eventually you will get there. You will get to find what you're passionate about, what ticks you, what makes you wake you up in the morning every single day and say, you know what, I want to solve this issue, right? And I think that's where we'll eventually get to, or people will eventually get to at the end of the day, just by being patient. So.
I love it. So, what does leadership mean to you?
It's a great question. I think there's many ways of defining leadership. The way that I would see it is, I love using this analogy of a leader is one that would be able to shine a light in a dark field. But there's multiple interpretations to that. One, a leader could be the only one that's handling that torch or that lighting device across that field, and they could be that only one. But I think a great leader would be one that could teach others how to be able to light their own torches or help others light their own torches so that in a way that field no longer becomes dark whatsoever, it's crystal clear. And when you become a leader, you want to be able to instill certain values and a mindset or some sort of a culture, right, to a broader group of team members. And by being able to pass on that torch, you're effectively creating multiple leaders so that those leaders are teaching others that don't have those torches and have them light their own, to a point where you pretty much don't see your dark field anymore. You see the field and what's out there. And I think that's really the core definition of a leader, is being able to, um, yes, set the path, light that initial path, but then build those other leaders that can run and be self-sufficient by themselves.
I love that. It's that really illuminates the perspective there. If I can make a terrible joke, but I think the one thing I really love about that is it's the compounding effect of leadership, and it's just
Yeah,
it goes back to kind of not looking at far enough down the road, right? Like I think a
yeah,
lot of people just get trapped in that moment where it's just like I gotta figure out this situation versus how do I set myself and others up for success down the line. And that's how you can bring the floodlights to that field versus your very narrow light that's only going to show a square foot of that field.
exactly. Yeah,
All right, Jeff, last question for you. What's your
sure.
definition of success?
Uh, Personally, for me, it's constantly growing and learning. Take small, big wins as um, a success. Doesn't really matter, because even the failures could also be considered a success for you, because at the end of the day, you learned one way of how not to do it, right? And that's what I'm a super pro positive sort of person. So take any negative and turn it into a positive. So for me, I'll take anything and make it be a definition of success for me. So the more I can continuously learn, it could be on even the silliest of things in my personal life, like how to mow the lawn or how to bake a cake. Like those are definitions of success. I'm constantly growing and learning, so the more you're learning and growing, I see it as being a measure of success or a definition of success.
I love that. Now you got me curious, though. Do you bake?
I do not bake. I wish I baked. If I baked, probably this whole kitchen would be on fire. But I hope that one day I can bake.
Well, it sounds like you got the right ingredients here to kind of learn how to do that and not burn your house down, which is a net win all around.
Yeah, absolutely. I love your puns, by the way.
Yeah,
They're
I'm just
perfect.
rolling in them right now. Well, Jeff, hey man, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk through this. I think there's a lot of good nuggets here that a lot of people can take a lot of value in, and I think overall, it's just that idea of continuing to learn. We got a long life ahead of us, and it would be a shame not to spend that time continuing to learn. So, Jeff, thank you for the time, and thank you for everything that you do for the community.
Likewise, appreciate you having me here. So thanks, Jason.
Thanks. And Jeff, if people are interested in learning more from you or want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, you can obviously reach out to me on LinkedIn. So, Jason, looking to you to share my LinkedIn page, but
Got you
I
covered.
also awesome. But I also have my own website. It's called All Things Differ, so allthingsdfir.com. Slightly outdated, but it shows some of the concepts that we've talked about throughout the call today. That hopefully would be enlightening to other folks. But please do not hesitate to reach out. I love talking to people, so don't be shy. Ask questions.
Awesome. Appreciate it, Jeff.
Absolutely.